This is Heong Piah, also known as Beteso or Matisu. And since Chinese New Year is coming, and it's the year of the horse, which is the Ma, or the Bei, so you can pick some Beteso to celebrate. So Hong actually means xiang, fragrant. So the fragrance actually comes from maltose, shallot oil, and the sesame seeds that are used in the filling. It's a very simple pastry, but it is quite difficult to master. They were quite a huge inspiration for me when I first started working on my cookbook Chinese Pastry School. Somewhere in 2021 or 2022, the news of this bakery, Tan Hock Seng, a Hokkien bakery in Singapore, closing down, and one of their signature items was this. After their closure, I'm not sure if there are any more shops in Singapore that make these from scratch. So a lot of Singaporeans actually go to Malaysia to buy our Heong Piah, get our Heong Piah fix. So I wanted to try making this at home, and I've got a recipe for this, so you should try it too. So this is how you prepare shallot oil. So instead of cutting it in rings, you want to cut it the other way around. And this way you get slivers of roughly the same size. It's just 1 part shallot to 2 parts oil. So this starts out cold because you want the shallots to cook inside out. You want it to be the same temperature. And then we just heat this slowly. We start with a small-ish fire. All these bubbles here is actually the water leaving the shallot. So now you see that the bubbles have slowed down quite a bit. That means that most of the water has evaporated. You need to hit a certain temperature for the fragrance to come out. And then let it come to a golden brown. But you don't want it to get too brown because it will continue to cook a little bit more after it comes off the heat. The heat got a bit strong towards the end, but you should ideally stop a little bit before it turns this color. This will crisp up. And it will crisp up a lot more nicely if you separate it. This is some homemade maltose. So I've made this by sprouting wheat berries for 4 days, typically 4 days, but it was raining this week, so it took about 6 to 7 days to sprout to a certain height, the maltose pool. Who needs cheese pool when you can have maltose pool? What I really love about homemade maltose is that it's a lot more flavorful than store-bought maltose. Right now it's very, very stiff, so we're just gonna put it over some hot water. We'll add some brown sugar, add some salt, mix this well, shallot oil that we prepared earlier. The other important fragrance is from sesame seeds. It's a fairly tricky pastry to make, considering how liquidy this is and how much sugar goes into the filling. And sugar is difficult to work with because it will dissolve and then it becomes this syrup, and then this piah actually explodes quite easily. So it's actually a lot of skill to master this. To make our wrapping easier, we're going to thicken this with some cooked glutinous rice flour. You get really stiff dough at this point. When you think of puff pastries, you often think of danishes and croissants, but there's this whole world of Chinese puff pastries. So we have your tau sa piah, we have spiral mooncakes, the yam mooncakes. So this is also a puff pastry recipe where we start with a water dough and an oil dough. So water dough is Yeo Min and oil dough is Yeo Su. Depending on what kind of pastry you're making, you can add different flavors into the dough directly. This is the homemade maltose. We will dissolve in the water first. These are optional, some salt and some sugar. Salt is stuck. What you're doing here is to disperse the oil droplets in the water so that when we pour this all in, there's just little droplets all over the dough. It will look a bit clumpy at first, but don't worry, it will all come together. Turn this out. I'm just gonna leave it aside and let it rest and let the gluten develop itself. I just leave this in the corner and I will cover it with a bowl so I don't get scolded by my 老师 for wasting cling wrap. For this oil dough, I'm using flour and shortening. We're just going to rub this together. You can use a lot of things for this oil dough. I just like using shortening sometimes. It's a bit of a shortcut. It has a more neutral flavor so that the shallot oil and the maltose can really stand out. This is where we make a paste. You find this being made in the hottest of kitchens, sometimes outdoors. When I see these clips of Heong Piah from Malaysia, you know, usually wearing singlet, then they're out there rolling, portioning, rolling, making, and I'm just like, wow, a lot cooler to me than those French chefs. This is a very temperature stable dough. You can make this in your home kitchens without turning on the AC. For a lot of Chinese puff pastries, I like to do the xiao bao su method. You need to portion the dough into individual portions. So we portion this into 6 pieces, which is about 20 grams each. We're just going to neaten it. And you'll see that the dough is actually quite smooth. Cover it so it doesn't dry out. And then for the oil dough, we also portion it into 6 pieces, about 10 grams each. And then we round them off. For xiao bao su, the important thing is to work in the order that you started. I start from 1, I wrap 1, and then I put it back at the position of 1. The wrapping in Chinese pastry, when you wrap, we like round things and we like things to be round. That means oil dough to sit very snugly in the water dough. To do this, you use this part of your hand. It's called the hu kou. You pull the water dough upwards using this part of your hand, while you push the oil dough down using your thumb. Start from 1, remember? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Wow, this one is my favorite style of lamination because I always say Chinese people have no time to wait. For this xiao bao su, you roll like that. A lot of layer already, right? Chinese pastry is just a very different art, and I just hope more people see it as a craft of its own. Now we change directions because 1 roll is not enough layers. How does this become a wrapper? I'll show you. Press it down in the middle, bring in the 2 sides, and squash it. It works! And then we roll it out. Usually when you buy this from Malaysia, they are baked in these huge ovens, the tandoori ovens. So when you piak the pastry to a hot wall, what happens is that the bottom cooks first and then it forms a seal, which is why the piak doesn't really explode. But in a home oven, it's a little bit harder. So this is what I do to kind of increase my chances of success. Preheat a tray in the oven first. And what you do is put some water and then you piak it onto a tray. Already. It's like 3 little white mantos. What we need is some Maltose glaze and some sesame seeds. And now they are ready for the oven. The mark of a good Heong Piah is this lava molten filling. And the second sign is that it dropped everywhere. I really love this. The baking time is a bit long, 30-35 minutes, and that's what makes it super crispy. And the filling is very fragrant. So I think if there's any pastry that sort of signifies or embodies this saying that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, it is this pastry. This pastry may be difficult to master, but it's absolutely worth your time, so you should try this out.